the concrete monsters that would not die. Germany's Flak towers. In the heart of cities like Vienna and Berlin, enormous concrete structures still loom over the surrounding rooftops today, decades after the war that built them ended. These are the Flak towers, colossal anti-aircraft fortresses so massive and so overbuilt that even when Soviet engineers packed them with tons of dynamite after the war, many simply refused to fall. This is the story of the concrete giants that Nazi Germany built to shield its cities from Allied bombers, and why so many of them remain standing to this very day. A response to the bombing of Berlin. By the late summer of 1940, the Royal Air Force had begun launching bombing raids against Berlin, strikes that caused relatively minor physical damage, but delivered a devastating blow to German morale and to the personal pride of Adolf Hitler himself. Hitler, humiliated by the notion that enemy aircraft could penetrate the skies above his own capital, seemingly unopposed, demanded that his engineers construct a new kind of defense system so formidable that it would make such raids impossible in the future. The task fell to architect Friedrich Tams, who was ordered to design a new kind of structure unlike anything that had come before. A building that would function simultaneously as an anti-aircraft gun platform, a radar and command center, and a bomb shelter capable of protecting tens of thousands of civilians at once. Construction on the first of these towers began in Berlin in the autumn of 1940, and remarkably, the initial structure was completed in a matter of months, a testament to the sheer scale of labor and resources the Nazi regime was willing to pour into the project. 3 major cities would eventually receive Flak towers: Berlin, Hamburg, and Vienna, with each city typically receiving a pair of complementary structures working in tandem, a larger gun tower known as the Gefechtssturm, and a smaller radar and control tower known as the Lichtturm, positioned nearby. Engineering on an unprecedented scale. The scale of these structures was almost impossible to comprehend at the time of their construction. The largest of the Flak towers stood over 40 meters tall, roughly the height of a 13-story building, with walls of reinforced concrete up to 3.5 meters thick, thick enough to withstand a direct hit from the heaviest bombs the Allies were dropping at the time. The concrete itself was reinforced with a dense lattice of steel rebar, and the towers were built as essentially freestanding fortresses, engineered without windows or any of the typical architectural vulnerabilities that might compromise their structural integrity under bombardment. Perched atop each gun tower were multiple batteries of heavy anti-aircraft artillery, most commonly the 128mm Flak 40 guns, among the most powerful anti-aircraft weapons fielded by any nation during the war. These guns could hurl a shell to an altitude of over 14,000 meters, far higher than most bombers of the era typically flew, and the towers were often equipped with smaller supplementary guns to handle aircraft flying at lower altitudes. The accompanying radar tower housed the fire control equipment necessary to direct this considerable firepower with accuracy, allowing the two structures to function as a single integrated air defense system capable of putting up a devastating wall of flak against incoming bomber formations. Beyond their military function, the Flak towers doubled as some of the most effective bomb shelters ever constructed, with the Berlin towers alone capable of sheltering upwards of 10,000 to 30,000 civilians during a single air raid, along with priceless art treasures and museum pieces that were moved into their reinforced interiors for safekeeping. Some towers even contained fully functioning hospitals, complete with operating theaters, in anticipation of mass casualties from Allied bombing campaigns. A fortress that outlasted the regime it built. As the war drew to its brutal conclusion in 1945, the Flak towers took on a final and unexpected role, transforming from anti-aircraft platforms into some of the last defensible strongholds of the crumbling Nazi state. During the Battle of Berlin, the Flak Tower at Zoo Station became a desperate refuge for tens of thousands of civilians and retreating soldiers as Soviet forces closed in on the city center, its thick concrete walls proving impervious to the artillery bombardment that was reducing the rest of the capital to rubble around it. Even as Soviet tanks rolled through the surrounding streets, the towers stood essentially untouched by the fighting that was destroying everything around them. When the war finally ended, the victorious Allied powers were left with an unusual and frustrating problem: what to do with these nearly indestructible concrete monsters scattered across their newly occupied cities. In Vienna, Soviet occupation forces attempted to demolish the towers using massive quantities of explosives, yet found that the sheer density of the reinforced concrete and the structural design of the buildings made complete destruction almost impossible without endangering the surrounding neighborhoods that had grown up around them since the war. Engineers discovered that even when internal chambers were successfully collapsed with dynamite, the outer walls frequently remained standing, an eerie monument to the German engineering that had gone into their original construction. In Hamburg and Berlin, occupying forces made similar attempts, and similar failures followed. Some towers were partially demolished, their tops blown away to reduce their height and visual prominence, while others were left essentially intact simply because the cost and risk of complete demolition outweighed any practical benefit. Removing a structure with walls several meters thick, sitting in the middle of a densely populated city, using the demolition technology available in the late 1940s, proved to be a far greater engineering challenge than anyone had anticipated when the towers were first built. Life after war. In the decades since, cities have found remarkably creative ways to repurpose these unwanted concrete giants rather than continuing to fight a losing battle against their demolition. In Vienna, one of the surviving towers now houses the Haus des Meeres, a public aquarium that draws visitors into a structure that once housed anti-aircraft gunners defending against Allied bombers. Another Vienna tower has found use as a climbing wall, its sheer concrete face repurposed for recreational climbing sport rather than warfare. In Hamburg, one of the towers has been transformed into a striking mixed-use building, complete with a rooftop garden, hotel, and event space. Its brutal wartime architecture now wrapped in a green, publicly accessible facade that stands in stark contrast to its original grim purpose. Berlin took a different approach with its towers, ultimately demolishing the Zoo Tower complex entirely using a combination of extensive controlled explosions carried out gradually over several years, a process that still required enormous effort given the structure's resilience. Yet even there, traces of the original foundations remain buried beneath the site to this day, too deeply embedded and too costly to fully excavate and remove. Concrete ghosts of a fallen regime. The Flak towers stand today as strange and imposing reminders of a regime that poured staggering resources into engineering feats of brute survival, even as its broader war effort collapsed around it. Unlike so many other relics of the Second World War that have long since crumbled, rusted away, or been quietly demolished, these concrete giants continue to dominate city skylines that have otherwise moved on entirely from the war that built them. They serve as an almost unintentional monument, structures built for destruction and defense that have proven, through nothing more than the sheer stubbornness of their construction, remarkably difficult to erase from the landscape, even when the nation that built them and the war they were built to fight are now more than 3/4 of a century in the past.